Hi all! This video will cover the issue of monitoring and evaluation, or M&E, created as part of the Crowd Mapping for Social Change project pilot undertaken by Harassment between 2017 and 2018. So M&E is quite often the least interesting, the least exciting, and the least fun of any part of a project or program. But it is fundamentally critical to understanding your successes, whether the change you are seeking is actually happening, and a means by which to demonstrate to sponsors and donors that your work has merit. For that reason, planning for M&E should begin before you undertake any sort of work, not at the end of this work. It should be part and parcel of the development process for your organization overall, for any project work you conduct or activities you undertake. Conducting M&E is not only much easier, but likely more feasible if you've planned adequately for this, rather than scramble at the end of a project or activity to demonstrate that your accomplishments have actually advanced some sort of change. In the Theory of Change video, you would have learned about the significance of developing big picture ideas and coming up with questions that you want your organization to address in some way, as well as the models or frameworks for how you think change will actually unfold. Here I want to recap some basic premises around this idea of how to facilitate change, because these play a critical role in informing the M&E process. A theory of change can be understood in multiple ways. It could be, as already stated, a model or a framework, or it could be a process, or even some higher order rules that you believe will best help facilitate a change. This could be something that you develop yourself, as discussed in the Theory of Change video, based on your understanding of the particular context within which you work. For instance, in Harassmap's case, part of their theory of change involves a focus on promoting bystander intervention to get people to speak up, because what was noticed by Harassmap's co-founders is the widespread apathy of people on the street. In general, people would ignore sexual harassment when they saw it occur for a variety of reasons. Also, a theory of change could be something you develop based on some theoretical construct for how to create change. For Harassment, their bystander intervention focus also had a theoretical basis in the work of psychologists and other social scientists who had spent decades understanding bystander apathy and how to overcome it. This may help to inform how you go about addressing your specific social or political problem. There can be a blending of the empirical and the theoretical in the design of your own theory of change. The theory isn't always critical. What is most useful is that you have some sort of guiding framework, however you design it. This guiding framework will then help you to develop your vision and your mission. Very briefly, the difference between vision and mission is quite simply a scale of time. Vision is exactly as its name implies, your vision for a future reality. If you work on street sexual harassment, your vision, like Harassmap's, might be to achieve a social environment in which sexual harassment is not tolerated. Your mission is more immediate and more specific, the objective of your organization in the here and now to eventually get to your envisioned future. Mission has a number of components to it. First and foremost, you want your mission to be SMART. That is, you want to develop a mission from which specific objectives can be developed that can be measured, that are achievable, and that are relevant for your purposes and are timely, meaning you can reach these objectives within a set deadline. A useful way to go about starting this, or in other words, a way to be strategic about your mission, is to develop your long and short-term goals or objectives. For your long-term goals, map out the kinds of projects or activities that you would like your organization to engage in at some point down the line, maybe in 2 years, or 5 years, or even 10 years. For instance, if, like Harassmap, you were working to promote bystander intervention to help create zero tolerance for sexual harassment in the streets, you might decide that in your context, working with the police would be beneficial. As you are getting started with crowd mapping, you might know that with your initial level of capacity, building the requisite relationship with the police and building a sufficient enough evidence base and a reporting tool that the police would find satisfactory is not something you can achieve today or tomorrow. But maybe in 2 or 5 years, you could do this. This is what you would want to do. Identifying this as a long-term goal then will help you to develop your short-term goals, or the more immediate steps that will help you get to this longer-term project. If you know that you would like to work with the police and maybe build a police report directly into your crowd mapping tool, what do you need to do today and tomorrow to get to this point? Your short-term objectives essentially serve as a stepping stone that incrementally help you achieve progressively bigger or more scalable change. Both short and long-term goals, however, do not have to remain static, meaning depending on the practicalities of your day-to-day work and what is actually happening on the ground, you may need to adjust and amend your goals and objectives. Devising a schedule on which you revisit and reevaluate your goals every so often, maybe every quarter, biannually, or annually, would provide the flexibility to adjust your goals based on everyday exigencies. Taking the time to map out your short and long-term goals then will serve as a guide for the next part of developing your M&E framework. It is important here to note that you can monitor and evaluate your work on a project or activity level basis, or for your organization as a whole. You can develop a smaller scale framework to ensure that you have successfully completed a project, meaning that you not only meet the targets you set for the project, but that those targets may have resulted in some level of change, or you can develop a large-scale framework for measuring the bigger picture change you are seeking. In either case, what is important is to develop the indicators for how to measure change. A good example of this is the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. The SDGs include 17 core goals. The first of these is Goal 1, which is a long-term goal to end poverty by 2030. The UN has developed a number of sub-goals within this and then the specific indicators that will demonstrate the goal has somehow been met. One such indicator includes the proportion of people who live below the international poverty line. So, using this as an example, what you want to do here is identify a few things. One is variables. This is a specific item that you will be measuring. In the case of the UN SDG goal of ending poverty, this would be poverty levels. In HarassMap's case, this might be the institutional sexual harassment policies or bystanders standing up to sexual harassment. Two are the targets. This would be the target population or those groups who would receive the intervention and with whom you would measure change. With the UN SDGs, this is a broad swath of the population cutting across sex, age, and employment status. In your case, this might depend. Is this a project or an organizationally based framework? What goals are you developing the indicator for? Are you focused on a particular project that may be concerned with campus sexual harassment policies? If so, then your targets might be the institutions that implement policies. If it is organizationally based and you are focused on the long-term goal of developing your platform to receive police reports, then it might be the police. 3 is outcomes. This will be the change you want to achieve. As noted with the UN SDGs, the outcome is to see a reduction in the number of people living below the poverty level. Over time, what this means is creating a social, economic, and political environment in which people are able to thrive and earn the kind of income that keeps them out of poverty. In HarassMap's case, this might be to see an increase in the number of institutions that implement a sexual harassment policy. 4 is measurement. This will be the more specific method by which you will measure an actual change. Measurement can often be the place where groups have the most difficulty because, depending on how you have structured your goals and indicators, how to demonstrate the change may require analytic tools. Often, this will be in the form of frequencies or percentages. In the case of the UN, what is not detailed in the information they provide on indicators is how they go about actually measuring them. This information is often pulled from other UN entities, such as the UNDP, who undertake various analyses over time to measure whether the goals are being met. Having said this, with the goal of ending poverty by reducing the number of people who live below the poverty line, this likely involves measuring changing income levels or the purchasing power parity of a population over time after certain interventions have been implemented. So this is something that you want to consider as you develop your M&E framework. Are you looking for statistical measurements of change, which quite often are seen as more robust than more nominal, descriptive, or even anecdotal examples of change? The reason for this is that statistical values are easier to compare. Looking at a situation pre- and post-intervention from a numerical standpoint provides a more evident and a hard example of change. Having said this, though, numbers may obscure other examples of change. For instance, if you are working on promoting institutional sexual harassment policies, you might not get a policy implemented, but you may have built the requisite relationships and inspired enough interest among segments of an institution's membership that will help you to continue advocating for a policy. So this is not so easy to capture, but it may be just as important, particularly when you are starting out as an organization or when you are beginning a new project. In terms of statistics, the video on research will provide useful information for thinking about this. What is critical here, however, is that it might involve some amount of information or data collection, which might require baseline and follow-up surveys or pulling relevant scholarly literature with the kinds of data you need to start your project off. Finally, there are a number of organizations that have helpfully created some M&E framework templates that you might find useful in developing your own framework. I've provided only 2 here, but as you can see from the template copied here, many of the elements I've discussed are visible in some format. Additional links with useful information on M&E frameworks can also be found in the Harassment Technical and Best Practices Guide. Thank you.